one of the reasons why I created A Train 44 Team Productions is I want to see mainline steam excursions. That was one of the top 5 things on my bucket list that I really wanted to, see and do. And within 3 years, ever since I created my YouTube channel, I've been very fortunate enough to see at least one mainline steam excursion. Believe it or not, I actually witnessed a steam locomotive, not at the Illinois Railway Museum. It was actually at Strasburg Railroad. I went there for a family trip. I was a young kid, and all I remember is have my body looking out the window, or using my full body, and just looking out the window and watching the steam locomotive do its job. I remember hearing the big chuffs, the sounding of the bell, but most importantly, when I heard the whistle, it was like music to my ears for sure. I really didn't get to enjoy Strasburg Railroad. When I look back at it, if I had the opportunity to go back, I would definitely will do it, simply because I never really took full advantage of it. Then eventually I saw the Frisco 1630 at the Illinois Railway Museum. Believe it or not, I actually saw it come back to service in 2014, and it was just pretty cool to see. I didn't really get to witness my first mainline steam excursion until around 2016. I found out the Nickel Plate Road 765 was coming to town, and that was my chance to really see a mainline steam excursion. I went to Franklin Park railroad days because the 765 was going to be on display for the full day, and all I remember is just huge puffs of steam coming out of the smokestack and hearing its whistle as it's coming down the tracks, and it looked exactly just like it did when I looked at photos and videos of the 765 before we went to Franklin Park. The following day actually is when the 765 led a mainline steam excursion, and what better way to see my first mainline steam excursion in an area that I know very well. I mean, it's close to home, I know the area very well, so I knew for sure that I wanted to chase that one. Eventually I saw the 765 again for the Steam of the Valley event a few months later in September of 2016, and I just remember, and that was actually the very first time I've witnessed a photo run by, and the ride was amazing, and it reminded me a lot of the Fall Colors excursions that the Milwaukee Road 261 always held. Even though I never rode the 261 during the Fall Colors excursion, but I remember seeing videos of it, and when I did the Steam in the Valley, it reminded me a lot of the Fall Colors excursion. In 2017, I saw the 765 again. This time I rode behind it, and it was in Chicago for the Joliet Rocket. And since I was a passenger at the time, I got to witness what it was like being, what almost felt like being a celebrity in my opinion, because I'm waving at everybody, and I also stood in the vestibule, which basically if you stand at one end of the passenger car, you can look out the, like literally the open window, and you can just see the steam locomotive chuffing. I mean, that was a pretty awesome sight to see, and it was just something that I never really thought I would see before, but you just really get a different perspective. A few months later, I actually saw the Sioux Line 1003 for the very first time. It actually came down in my hometown area, and it brought me back the same feelings, when I first saw a mainline steam excursion or a steam locomotive on the main line. I had goosebumps. I had a huge smile on my face, and I was just in awe. I mean, when you see a steam locomotive on the main line, it immediately draws a crowd, and that's what Soo Line 1003 did last year. You know, it was in Galewood for a charity event, and then it went back home it went back to its hometown in Hartford, Wisconsin, the next day, and you know, I chased it to Lake Forest to Fox Lake, and you know, I got pretty nice shots of them, and eventually I would see the Soo Line 1003 again for the Santa Train event up in its hometown in Hartford. And let's just say that chase was pretty spectacular. You know, this year, 2018, was precedently unbelievable as far as like many different steam locomotives this year. We were able to see Southern Railway 401 at the Monticello Railway Museum, and then a month later I saw the Iowa Interstate 6988 do a like a mainline steam excursion sort of, and you know, just run from Mitchellville, Iowa to Altoona and back, and that's all for the fire department at Mitchellville. They put on a great show, and you know, and ever since I saw the Iowa Interstate 6988, that was unbelievable, because that was actually my very first time seeing a Chinese version, or Chinese American version steam locomotive. And then to top it all off, or the icing on the cake, is the Milwaukee Road 261. I mean, that was actually one of my very first steam engines that I want to see, and to see it this year is unbelievable, because believe it or not, I was actually hoping and praying it would come back down here to Chicago, but I took a leap of faith, and I went up north to Minnesota and saw the 261. Got really nice shots of him, and it was a trip that I'll never forget. And then most recently, I saw the 765 again for the Joliet Rocket. Mainly I was out trackside for it. You know, I didn't ride it like last year. Just wanted a different feel for it, and just going out trackside is always fun. I mean, there are two different ways that rail fans see mainline steam excursions. They can either ride it, or they can go out trackside to film it. But those are like the two different ways of doing it. But one has really no structure, whereas on the other hand, the other is going to be a lot more structured and tightly scheduled. Riding behind a steam locomotive, you really kind of feel like a celebrity. You're waving to strangers out trackside, and that's kind of how I felt when I rode behind a steam locomotive on the main line. I'm even more shocked when there's so many people like in one particular spot, and you know, they're like sardines in a can sort of crowd sort of way, where everybody's just like squeezing in one part, and they just you know, they have their phones, they have their cameras out, taking photos and videos of us, you know, flying past them. I'm usually in awe when I see that kind of crowd, but at the same time, I'm always nervous to see some people take a chance on, you know, risking their lives and watching them lean over the tracks in the train's path just to take one photo or video of it. But overall, when you're riding behind a steam steam locomotive on the main line, you really feel like a celebrity. Of course, when you're riding behind a steam locomotive on the main line, you may get the opportunity to see photo run-bys, which basically means either you can stay on the train or you can get off the train. Most passengers get off the train for photo run-bys, and that's the perfect opportunity to see the locomotive in action. Basically what happens is the locomotive will back up at to a certain distance, maybe even further than expected, and they pull the train forward once it's at a good solid distance, and people will film or take photos while the train's in motion. And they usually do that about 2 or 3 times. You maybe even get lucky if you just get 2 in. Most of the cases they just do 1 photo run by, and those are always a unique opportunity to get photos and videos of the steam locomotive if you're just riding behind it. I think when you are also riding behind a steam engine, there's really like no stress. I mean, you can just sit back and relax and look out the window. You can even feel the locomotive working. I remember when I rode behind the 765 in the Steam in the Valley, that I can actually feel the locomotive moving and how hard it's working. I mean, you can even see the thick black smoke out the window if you can, and that's always a pretty cool sight to see. Of course, as you're riding the train, you're probably going to interact with other rail fans and other passengers. Everyone just has a smile on their face. They're not bummed to be there. They're just excited because they're riding behind a piece of machine that you can barely find nowadays. So the other way of seeing a mainline steam excursion is going out trackside. So that's basically my preferred method, mainly because I want to see the locomotive in action as much as possible. The difference is about going trackside versus riding behind a steam locomotive on the main line is there's a lot more stress involved because you're trying to get ahead of the train, just so that way you can keep up with it and still take as much photos and videos as possible. I mean, at the same time, you're still waving to passengers and the crew. You're also you may still interact with other people or other rail fans, but there's more to it. I mean, you also have to play what it's called the waiting game, which basically means you have to stay out there and stay alert until the train comes through, and that's usually the hardest game ever because your anxiety is right up there. You're nervous, and that's pretty much all I can say about the waiting game. No one likes to play that game for sure, but we've played a lot of them when we do mainline steam excursions. We go out trackside for them. The waiting game is usually our worst enemy, but at the same time, the longer you wait, it pays off. So that's one of the biggest elements when it comes to seeing a mainline steam excursion out there is you got to play that waiting game. I mean, as long as you got like a scanner or you're listening to the crew, I think you'll be in much better shape. You'll be much more relaxed. So if you can find a scanner that works and you have the frequency to listen to that, I think you're on your A game. I also think if you also go trackside, in comparison to riding behind a steam locomotive on the main line, I think you're saving a little bit of money too. I mean, yes, you are wasting money by using a car which wastes gas. I just think it's much cheaper, simply because as long as you got a car that has good fuel mileage, I think you'll be in good shape. But whatever your preference is, whether if it's riding behind a steam locomotive versus going on trackside to see it, I mean, you get different perspectives. I mean, if you see if what you like and just go from there. I prefer trackside simply because I want to see the locomotive as much as I can. I will tell you that chasing a steam locomotive is not an easy task. I've been very fortunate enough to chase 2 or 3 different steam locomotives in my lifetime within 3 years. And your objective overall is to be safe. That's the most important thing. You gotta chase it safely, and your overall objective when chasing a steam locomotive is you gotta stay ahead of the train. Once you do that, and once you're ahead of the train, you can take as much photos and video as you need to. As long as you stay ahead of the train, I think you'll be in good shape. But before you even think about chasing a steam locomotive, you got to do your research. So that's one of the very first things that I always do is do your research. And what I mean by research is you gotta look up the event. Maybe if you need to, you might need to create your chase route. So you gotta find like the fastest way possible to get like from location A to location B. And along with that, you also gotta have some backup plans. You can't just have you can't just go, oh, I have a plan A and I'm gonna stick with it. You have to have more than one backup plan if you need it. Create a backup plan. So that's another thing that you should do if you want to make the if you want to chase a steam locomotive safely and successfully. And once you created your chase route, you've done your research. I think one of the other things that I would do in preparation for your chase is to recruit a team. And what I mean by recruit a team is if you have 1 or 2 other people that are interested in doing this, then invite them. The reason why I say that is because you get benefits from both ends. I mean, you will get your photos and videos that you want, and then the 2 or 3 other people that are with you have the photos and videos that they want. So it's a win-win situation. And on top of that, if there's one person that's driving, their main objective is to focus strictly on driving. That's my biggest emphasis on that. That second or third person can play a big role. And what I mean by that is they can look for the locomotive. See where it's at, track its location, or in fact, they may even help you get to the very next location. I say while you're doing your research though, you gotta pick the right location. So when I chased the Milwaukee Route 261, I used Google Maps a lot, and Street View was definitely a big help as well. So you gotta also find more location. You gotta find as many locations as you can, and then maybe narrow it down to a few. Maybe 1 for backup, and then maybe keep a few for backup. This next step is actually takes place on the day that you're chasing a steam locomotive. And it starts with be prepared. You gotta have your camera equipment ready. You gotta have, if you're using tripods, make sure that they're malfunctioning. If you got cameras, make sure that they're fully charged. You also the other thing that that may help as well. Maybe bring some snacks. Maybe bring some food. Make yourself a lunch, if necessary. Bring some drinks. Definitely bring water just in case. And you also gotta dress appropriately. You know, if you're chasing a steam locomotive in the winter or even in the summer, you gotta just dress appropriately for it. On my hand, what I do is sometimes I do have a duffel bag full of backup clothes, so I always use that. I usually bring that with me as well, just in case. But you know, those are just part of the very few steps that you need to do even before you start chasing a steam locomotive. On the day of the on the day that you're chasing a steam locomotive, my recommendation is you get to your location within a half hour or to an hour. You know, if you're going to one specific location that you're starting at to see the excursion, go there first. And then the chase goes on and on and on. And whoever's in that passenger seat, they can help you navigate you, or they're basically their wingman, is whoever is in that passenger seat. And while you're chasing out there, your number one priority, again, is to be safe. Once you get busted for speeding by law enforcement, that's it. You can't do it. Watching your speed is typical, because not only you don't want to get busted by law enforcement, but you're still being safe, which is your main priority. If you don't make it to the next location, it's okay. Stick to your backup plans. You can always go back to it. I also say that if you use your backup plans, it may still turn out great. And most importantly, when you're out trackside, watching the locomotive go by, your number one priority out there is still number one, be safe. But at the same time, you don't want to trespass, because you'll get busted by the railroad. You don't want to get busted by the railroad if you trespass. If you trespass, you're basically breaking the law, and you don't want to do that. But most importantly, you don't want to stand so close to the tracks. It's better to be further away from the tracks in comparison to be closer, because the steam locomotive has so many moving parts. You may never know what's going to happen, and it's better to be safe than sorry. I've been very fortunate to see many mainline steam excursions, but once you see one mainline steam excursion, you're never going to go back. And what I mean by that is you're going to be thirsty for more. If you hear about another steam excursion on the main line, you're going to have to go out for it. Or I'm always ready to go out for it. So my advice to seeing mainline steam excursions is stay on top of things. Trains Magazine will have some updates on mainline steam excursions. I also think social media can play a huge role. Believe it or not, social media has played a huge role when finding mainline steam excursions. That's how I was able to find the the Iowa Interstate 6988 running on the main line, and that's how I found out about Milwaukee Road 261 running the Gourmet Express this year. So right away, that's two mainline steam excursions that I was able to find just because of social media. There's still so many steam locomotives I want to see, and the main goal still remains the same, which is to see many different mainline steam excursions as possible. But at the same time, it's very questionable as far as the future is for mainline steam excursions. So my advice to every rail fan out there is, if you want to see a mainline steam excursion, and you have an opportunity to see a steam excursion on the main line, you better take it, because you have no idea when mainline steam excursions are going to be no more. And at the same time, it's an experience that you'll never forget.